I believe that climate crisis is going to rewrite the history of art, certainly of modern and contemporary art practice, through what we now call social practice, a term that has left out the word art, and which is defined not so much by the creation of art in public spaces, but the creation of conscious culture. Because we believe that what we currently need from artists is not more gallery and museum-based art, but their active participation in society, bringing in their creative, critical thinking tools. In Puerto Rico, more and more artists are transcending a US imported version of modernism, which was entrenched in notions of a civilizing whiteness. And these artists, many of them young, are gardening, they're farming, they're restoring landscapes, they're creating transformative aesthetic cultural experiences, and they're helping human and non-human communities to become resilient. Currently, we face a situation where the Puerto Rican government is bankrupt now for a decade, where there is widespread government corruption and a very dense bureaucratic inefficiency. We are still dealing with the ruins of Hurricane Maria, a Category 5 hurricane that destroyed 30% of the island's trees and most of its agriculture. A series of earthquakes in the southwest part of the island, the removal of the former governor by the people, which was remarkable, and then a very sad mass exodus of Puerto Ricans. Over 500,000 Puerto Ricans have left the island and migrated to the mainland during the past 5 years. We're facing coastal erosion. We are predicted to lose 25% of our land mass, towards the middle of this century. We are, when you walk through our towns and cities, you see dozens, if not hundreds, of abandoned family and commercial properties. Over 100 public schools are closed. And there is the new and renewed violation of the remaining undeveloped lands by commercial development. Basically, we are bankrupt. The whole island is for sale, and quite cheaply. We have all been destroyed by hurricanes, and we will more than likely be destroyed again. The future is here. The future came to visit Puerto Rico, and it has moved in. But of course, crises present opportunities, and many citizens, ecologists, and artists are stepping in, though mostly without funds.
In 2008, I embarked on a solo multimedia expedition entitled The Universal Human Experience. So it was a fact-finding mission, which was an investigation of various conflicts and resolutions that have shaped cultures of opposition. So for approximately 2 years, I backpacked throughout the Americas as a part of what I call phase 1 of the project. So through my documentation of these socio-political issues, I seek to capture the reality of a world affected by the plight of human history. One of the major conflicts documented and investigated along the way was humankind's interaction with the environment and the ways in which various environments affect sociological, cultural, political, and economic interactions. It was then that I started paying more attention to climate injustices. All of us are basically in the same boat. We can no longer look and say it's only one place experiencing these hardships. Just like every other time in the history of mankind, when we face these global or regional challenges, we have to network together in order to help one another out in various ways, including the arts. Documentation is very, very important. Most people don't understand how important documentation is, and that's one of the reasons why I choose to go to these places and document these situations, so to speak. If I had a few key takeaways from my presentation, I would say it's very important understanding what happened to Brazil's National Museum due to fire, and other Caribbean islands such as Dominica, St. Croix, and Puerto Rico, where you could see a lot of your artifacts and a lot of your buildings and your cultural institutions damaged or devastated. It's very important that we document, that we digitize in 2D and 3D to protect our culture.
We ascribe this malign intent to Jamaica, you know, so there is this intention to destroy, this evilness that we use to talk about the natural hazards, which of course we're all facing many more of. And we use the language of conquest, I noticed as well. You know, we want to tame and we want to restrict and we want to train and we want to relocate and channel. You know, these are words that I think speak to some underlying attitudes about how we regard natural systems, even those natural systems on which we are so very dependent, such as fresh water. We think bush swamp nature is kind of backward, and all the infrastructure of man is forward thinking and forward looking. And this is something I feel strongly, especially as it's very likely that the Caribbean is going to be both water deprived in the near future and also have to cope with much more flooding, much more extreme events around watercourses, whether they're perennial rivers or just watercourses which run some of the time.
Sargassum is this brownish, greenish seaweed or algae that you often see on the beaches. But initially, it is supposed to float on oceans, and it is found in large amounts at the Sargasso Sea mainly, but also found in West African coast, Gulf of Mexico, and of course, the Caribbean. So it serves as a natural habitat for many different organisms and marine life, either endemic organisms who just live in there, or other for temporary species, for instance, for their migration, fish migration, or also it serves as a shelter, protection for sea turtles, for example. So it's also a temporary tool for this marine life. And finally, it helps also maintaining a certain balance of the Atlantic and Caribbean coastal ecosystem by giving poor nutrient warm waters specific nutrients. However, this natural and ecological balance started to shift, let's say about 10 years ago, when scientists noticed a considerable increase in the amount of sargassum in the oceans, not only, but also on the beaches. So what happened? Obviously, it's a human factor. And this human factor is due to the use of chemical nutrients, mainly such as agricultural fertilizers, but also the use of water waste, and coming mainly from Latin America, but also from West Africa. So what is the Homo Sargassum Project? Beyond raising awareness, we wanted to stress several issues. So the initiative comes from artist Luisa Maracho, who is from Martinique, but Paris-based, and who started working and noticing the proliferation of the sargassum in Martinique a couple of years ago, and started to take photographs and include them in her works and installations. So she approached the foundation and wanted to do an exhibition about this issue in the French Caribbean. And we suggested to broaden it because it's not only the French Caribbean being impacted, but the whole Caribbean, the wider Caribbean, but also we wanted to include West Africa, Latin America, who were part of the problem and the solution. And finally, we wanted also to go beyond just the artistic approach and work closely with scientists through collaborations with researchers, but also companies who have developed specific technologies to treat the sargassum. We wanted to not only consider and see the sargassum as a scourge, right? It's not only a human challenge, it was part, or is part of an ecosystem. So we really needed to see what can we do about it? Well, how can we see it as an opportunity and not just a challenge?
Planetary Sensing, Navigations Below the Surface, is an artistic research project that has started with research and residency in Puerto Rico about 10 years ago, very slow. It has in the last years very much circled around Jamaica and the area of Trelawney, Falmouth, and especially Oyster Bay, the glistening bay of Jamaica, one of the most important bioluminescent bays in the world. The bioluminescent bays are a very endangered and threatened ecology, and the Jamaican glistening waters is one of the brightest, one of the strongest still. It's a very threatened globally and regionally threatened ecosystem, and it has a very special place also in the marine science in the island. We've set up to engage in the bay, its surroundings, the problems, and the possibility of making an environment sustainable that's at the moment threatened by not only the last years of the pandemic, but also by a difficult situation for the fishermen surrounding and the developments around the bay. Planetary sensing identifies the necessity to experiment with non-extractive ways of collaboration and cohabitation based on the bioluminescent particularity of local marine systems and its recent transformations. Building an infrastructure that evidences the strong connection between ecological and social violence while empowering a diversity of already existing artistic expressions. I would like to highlight the people that have enabled and the institutions, the broader network, and also one of the main supporters of ocean related agency and arts in Jamaica, TBA Academy and Alligator Head Foundation. And I think this is also one of the key factors why we can think of a way to connect ecotourism and a community basis in a fruitful way, because we have many people that have experience and practice over years in a network that very much focuses on the Caribbean.
What I realized too is that as funders, listening to all the presentations today, we think of communications as part of the budget line. So it's admin, communications, your project objectives, but we never think about the importance of communicating what people do and hearing the panelists who are actively engaged in that space of telling stories. Many donors look at that 10%, 15% communications budget as just a checklist or a press release or a newspaper article, but haven't really thought of how we're empowering the communities that we serve to tell their stories better. Culture is a fundamental part of everything we're doing, whether we're on the oceans, doing research and scientific research, or catching fish, or whether we are in a corporate space building our corporate future and strategy. It's within a culture of a national context and a historical context, and we need to do better at blending those.